Hello, my name is Ernest Chow, and for my Zenith project, I wanted to do an expansion on my movie poster project. I wrote a premise for a story called The Nation of Beasts, which I think is a really interesting and edgy piece that I wrote. It's not really a full screenplay, but I liked it a lot, so I wanted to do more with it. And it kind of ended up becoming this. It was a movie poster where I used Illustrator to make this kind of weird emoji looking thing with some edgy stuff on it. And this was the mood board that I used because I wanted the environment to be this kind of cyberpunky area, big city with, you know, all that kind of stuff. So I was really into it, and I wanted to make a little bit more concept art for this movie. So I ended up creating another mood board with the intention of making one more, which I never got to. But the idea for this mood board was to keep on the same vibe as the original one, but to do a little bit more environments and stuff like that. I knew that I was very uncomfortable with Photoshop throughout freestyle. And so I kind of wanted to force myself to do a little bit more Photoshop painting. And so I tried to do it, and it didn't really work so good. But on top of making other environments, I also wanted to create more assets, kind of like company logos or items. I think I had an idea to make a weird motorcycle that the different characters would use in this movie or screenplay, because I felt like having these kinds of mechanisms would really make it feel a little bit more visceral. And so I used my comfort zone, which was Illustrator, to create these logo designs. The first one is a company called BD, which is the company that the main characters work at. It's kind of where they start. And I remembered I was busting these out, and my litmus test for whether or not the logos were good was, first of all, was I okay with the way that they looked? And the other thing that I did was I asked people, I think I asked Davey at the time, if he could figure out what the company did. And they got it right. It was for a shipping company. So that was very cool. I also found out like yesterday that the bottom one looks a lot like the Google Express logo, which I kind of feel bad about, but I also kind of don't feel bad about because I didn't know that Google Express was a thing. So yeah. The second logo here is for C's Biomedical Engineering Institute. I just decided that it'd be cool, fun, and edgy to have a medical company in my world building. So I made it. Similarly to my marketing project, I wanted to lean into the golden ratio or the golden rule or whatever it's called in making this logo. So everything is at a ratio of 1.618, I think it is. Just because I wanted to get more comfortable with it. I think golden ratio logos look really cool, and I want to become more comfortable with it. So I worked with that, and that's kind of how that came out. And so this is like pretty bog standard Illustrator stuff. I wanted to do something a little bit heavier. So I had this idea to make this neon sign. I think I saw somewhere on Instagram like a bunch of months ago, or maybe years ago, this person who made a neon sign using like a white line with a pink stroke or like a different colored stroke. And it made like this really simple but really convincing neon kind of thing. So I went along that, and as you can see on the right hand side, we have a bunch of layers. You can kind of see how I did that. It's a lot of stroke work. I basically made everything on flat, so you would be looking straight at it. I added like a lower opacity glow around each of the lines. And then after that, I selected it, pressed E to get the shear tool. And with the shear tool, I was able to move it at an angle to make it look a little bit more interesting and a little bit more real. I just think that it looks better this way. I also really wanted to dig into the details. So as you can see, or maybe you can't see because it's a little bit hard, there's actually a wire going down all of the wiring in the back behind what is supposed to be a glass pane. And there's some pegs holding up the tubes where the gas would be stored to light up. And the wires all get routed to where it would be mounted to the wall. I also wanted to mount it to a wall, but I wanted to really emphasize that the panel behind the sign is see-through, so you can see the stars through it. And I felt like putting a wall and connecting this to the environment would block too much of the sky, which I think looks really nice. It's just a really light gradient between dark blue and dark purple, and the stars are just made with the brush tool. I think this is definitely my favorite production from this project in terms of the way that it looks, just because I don't know, I vibe with it a lot. It's really, I like it. It's not super complicated, but it's fun. The next thing that I did, which is the last thing that I did for the Zenith project, since my Zenith project was really just a bunch of like little projects put together to put into this world for the movie, was this pill bottle. Because I don't know, edgy medical company, edgy pill bottle, you gotta have them. So I did this using the little three-dimensional tool. I did not know that Illustrator had a little 3D widget, but it does. So I messed around with it and kind of created these rectangles. I used the rotate or revolve function to make the cylinders, and then after that I edited it. So I don't know if you can see on this dark background, but there is actually an outer layer and an inner layer for the glass. And then the text was, I first made the label on a flat surface, and then I turned it into a symbol. As you can see, that little clover symbol under the 3D revolve options window, that's your symbols. And so when you go into the revolve options, you can see the map art. When you go to the map art, you can put text on the surfaces and they'll warp it for you, which I think is super neat. And what I ended up with was these three. I know that the one in the top right is the first iteration that I did, which I felt was a little bit too illustratory. It was really hard to tell what it was. I didn't really like the bubbles that I put in it. So I decided to go a little bit more for a render style, which you can see in the far left and the bottom right, which I kind of leaned harder into the widget, which I also don't think looks perfect. I don't really love how much it looks like it's being made in Unity. So I think if I had more time, I would definitely look into trying to kind of lower the resolution of the shading in the rendery looking styles, because I want it to look like it's from Illustrator, kind of keep the same style as what I made before. I obviously like the one on the left the best because I made it the biggest, because I think it works and it fits the color scheme a little bit better than the one in the bottom right. If I was making an advertisement, I think I'd make it more like the bottom right, but for this project I want to keep everything kind of cohesive. So in the end, I kind of have a spread that looks a little bit something like this. I know I feel like I definitely could have done a lot more with this project if I had managed my time a bit better. But nevertheless, I think I did a pretty good job. I really like the neon sign. And yeah. Don't make sure that you do your files properly though, because I tactically lost my Photoshop drawings, but they were quite bad. I spent a lot of time on them and I wasn't super happy with how they turned out. So I'm kind of glad that I lost them because I like my Illustrator work a lot better. Anyway, that's my Zenith project. I'm not really sure if we're going to have time for questions, but if you have any questions, go ahead and ask them now, I guess. But yeah, thank you for watching. Yeah.